Hello, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Game, the podcast where we interview new board and tabletop game designers about their creations. And today we have Paul, the creator of Brassbound. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. So you've created a bit of a unique game here, Brassbound. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch about it? What is the game? What's it about?
Sure thing. Yeah. So the tagline is that Brassbound is the tabletop board game that you can play with the building bricks you already own. Supports 1 to 4 players, and most matches complete in 30 minutes or less. Accessibility is really, really important to me. So the learn to play scenario, the core rule book, and the first campaign are all completely free. You can buy 2 entire armies like what I've got shown here for less than the cost of buying a single unit for one of the more popular tabletop games.
Okay. So that's pretty enticing. So I have to say, someone who grew up, when Warhammer was a thing, I'd always look at it and go, that looks amazingly cool. But
Yeah.
A, it was very expensive. And B, I have zero artistic ability. So my ability to paint the minis was really limited. Why did you decide to make this game? What inspired you?
Yeah, and I can absolutely relate to that sentiment as well, right? Um, Even, the starter kits being priced at what they are, it was never an option for me. The short of it is I wanted to make the game that I wished existed. I've been creating stories and rule sets since when I was a kid. And that was before Lego had all the branded lines they have today. And so you really have to use your imagination. Fast forward to adulthood, and I still do that. Shortly after COVID, I had played a lot of games, had a lot of time on my hands. I just couldn't find anything that I really felt like, yes, this is the game that I want to play again and again. There's nothing I would change. I really like it as is. So I took one of those ideas that I had that had been kind of bouncing around in my head for a couple of years, and I just posted on Reddit. I said, hey, I made some models. Here they are. And I've got some rules. I would love feedback. I kind of joke with the community that if people had just said, your models suck and your ideas are stupid, that the whole thing would have crashed right there. But I was just blown away by the amount of feedback I got. And it quickly became the kind of thing that I couldn't manage on Reddit anymore. I couldn't track what I was talking about with which person and where they were in play testing and where they were in building their models. And so I made a Discord server. And what was really magical about that is that instead of having kind of a bunch of one-on-one conversations, people started talking with each other. And so they started coming up with these ideas and these settings and these stories, these mechanics I would have never thought of by myself. And so what's been really, really cool is that they've contributed in all kinds of ways, right? So my initial ask of help me look at the rules, we did that. We polished up the rule set, we released it. We've also dramatically improved the models. I don't have the current or the original version in front of me, but they've gone through probably 8 to 10 revisions each. What was really, really cool is we even had people help write the story. The people who just jumped right in and said, okay, let's get some first-person perspective of what is happening in the Brassbound universe. If you fast forward to today, we've got a community of players from all over the world. We've fully released Brassbound, which is the game that I'm showing right here. We are almost done with a prequel game called Knights of the Air. And then a sequel to Brassbound is going to drop this summer. And then we've got 2 to 3 more concepts. These are all fan-made games, people from our community who suggested things. They're all in different stages of active development. And what I love is these aren't just my ideas. They're ideas that people came up with and they ran with.
That's pretty amazing. I have to say, for my own designs, whenever those conversations happen without you, and they evolve organically amongst your community, that has to be one of the most satisfying experiences. And it sounds like your community has really, really bought into this, this entire Brassbound universe. that you've
Mhm.
created. That must be
It's been
incredibly
magical, frankly.
satisfying.
Yeah. Yep.
So who's the audience for this game? Who did you make this game for?
Yeah. I mean, partially I made it for myself and people like me. That's people that like to play deeply. Um, and so what I mean by that is thinking really critically about every aspect of the game. You know, why does this model look the way that it does, and why is it different from this other model that's very similar? Um, what sound does this model make when it moves? You know, and I've been known to make those sounds as I move my little guys around. Um, you know, making little pew pew sounds or making neural sounds as the airplanes fly around. And so I really think it's the intersection of people who like to play with war games and people who like to build with plastic building bricks. That intersection is where I found the most success. As far as reach wise, mostly it's people in the United States and Europe. We do have players from 5 different continents. And then I haven't explicitly asked or done a survey of the community, but from the people I've gotten to know personally, they're mostly dads, parents. We do have a handful of teenagers as well.
Okay. Well, when you're demoing the game later, I think we're going to insist that you make the sounds as the vehicles move across the board.
Yeah, sure thing. That's half the fun.
So, you know, when you and I have talked about your game, one of the most interesting aspects of it is the fact that the players build the models themselves. And in fact, there isn't, if I'm remembering correctly, there isn't some like strict, your, this unit must look exactly like
Yeah.
that. Everyone gets the freedom to kind of create the model the way that they want to create the model. Are there any bounds to that, or is it just make it however you want to look? Are there some guidelines for the construction?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, there are guidelines. I wouldn't say they're hard and fast rules. And those guidelines mostly come from my experience playing tabletop games where I've seen what works and what doesn't work, both from a design perspective, but also from an implementation perspective. If you say it's wide open, go make whatever you want, um, you know, you can have one person that builds models that are all 1 inch tall and one person builds models that are all 5 inches tall. Um, and that presents actual problems when it comes down to play and measure and see, can I see you? Can you see me? Um, and so what I decided was there's going to be an established scale for the game. And that established scale is 15 millimeter. I picked that scale because it's a widely available scale as far as models go. You can go and buy as many third-party models as you want, but it also works really well in Lego. Beyond that, what I've said is, you know, people, you're welcome to make bigger or smaller models, and if you do that, I would recommend playing with a bigger or smaller board and making sure that people have that same expectation. That's really the only limitation. I don't say you have to use Lego. I don't say you have to use building bricks at all. You can use whatever you've got.
So you basically created a rule set with a tremendous amount of flexibility on the player sides about how they represent their units. That's very intriguing. We're looking forward to seeing what that actually looks like. When you were designing this, what were your core principles? What were the non-negotiables about what needed to be included in this game? Because anyone who's designed a board game knows that what you look at it, what it looks like in the beginning, it looks very different by the end. But there's always some core principles that remain. So what were your core principles?
Yeah, goodness. You know, what's really funny is I mentioned having this rule set bouncing around in my head for years. The rule set was originally for a spaceship game. And that is about as different from this tabletop war game as I think you can possibly get. There were a couple things that were really central and helped me when I got stuck and helped me kind of think through how do I move forward. One was time. So I don't get a whole lot of time for tabletop gaming. You know, if you take insert name here of big popular war game, there's time spent army building, there's time spent setting up, there's time spent playing, there's time spent taking down. And I cannot count the number of times that I have lost the game before we've rolled a single dice. Similarly, there are games where you really need to get 2 hours into it to really get to the meat of the game. And there's nothing worse than realizing not only have I lost and it's non-recoverable, but I don't have time to play again. We're done. And so for me, I really wanted to make sure that Brassbound was something you could play with the time you have. The starter scenario is designed to go very quickly, rarely taking more than 15 minutes in a full match, which is twice the size. Rarely takes more than half an hour. And so in that way, you can play through a couple different games in an afternoon. And if you are very clearly losing one, you can reach across the table, shake hands, and move on to another one. I also wanted it to be accessible. And you've touched on this a little bit. I didn't want to say you have to use these specific models and they have to come from this manufacturer, they have to be painted in this way. My goal was to make great looking models that use common, inexpensive parts. And I decided that I could try to charge money for it, but really what I want is the community and say it's all going to be free. The rules are free. The building instructions for 18 different models are all free. The story, all of it. I've even made a document to help you order your army from a third-party reseller that has the actual XML you need to just copy and paste because I really want to make it easy for people to get started. Lastly, I really wanted a game that enabled your creativity and didn't, put it into a box. And so you have a lot of choices on different mediums. And the reason why I chose, plastic building bricks is because they're commonly available. And when they are purchased secondhand, they're actually very inexpensive. One thing you'll see is that you can take apart a model and you can show it, having suffered damage. But if you don't like it, you can also use those same bricks to make a better model. And so in that way, it ends up being a reusable resource in a way. And so many of the actual bricks that I got here have been used on dozens of different models at this point.
Okay. So what are the rules or mechanics that you think really define Brassbound and give Brassbound its identity?
Yeah. So I think it's going to look similar to a lot of other tabletop war games set at this scale. You have an army comprised of multiple different units. You're going to move those units. You're going to attack your opponent. You're going to try to capture certain parts on the board. But what really makes it special is that I use 3 sets of dice. I use a D6, a D8, and D10. And these aren't special printed dice that you have to buy from only me. These are dice that you can buy at any game store you have. And those dice are using 2 different mechanics. The first mechanic is a check for a 4 or less. The second mechanic is a check for a 5 or greater. And so pretty quickly, people will pick up on that the D6 is going to be better at the check that does 4 and less. And the D10 is going to be better at the check that does 5 and better. And so very, very quickly, you can start to tell what different units are good at and what their strengths are. The other thing I really like about it is it requires you to compromise, right? If you only equip your army with units that are good at the 4 and under checks, you're going to struggle when you have the 5 and above checks. So there's really no one size fits all. You're going to have to compromise. And I think making an interesting decision is half the fun.
So it sounds like when you talked about accessibility, you're not just talking about accessibility in terms of availability, in terms of price, and in terms of also you don't have to paint these things, which just brings me tremendous joy, again, as someone who has 0 artistic talent. But it sounds like you worked on making the rules very accessible too.
Yeah, absolutely. What I really want is for somebody to be able to just get a bin of bricks, turn them over, and be able to play within an hour. So all the rules are available for free on my website. The very first thing I do is say start with the quick play scenario. It's the very first thing you'll find in the rule book, and it allows you to get started. I also didn't want to say this is the only way to play. And what's been really cool is seeing when people share pictures of their campaigns they make that are no way related to the core setting of the game. This is a game that is set in an alternate 1920s and 1930s. People have done futuristic settings, people have done sci-fi settings, and that's great. The rule set is flexible. If you don't want to use the established story, that's fine. You can absolutely do that. And that's been a lot of the joy of the game, is seeing how people use the rule set, modify it, tweak it, add their own custom rules. It's been just a delight to watch.
It sounds really intriguing, and we'll be getting the demo very shortly. But I just have one more question to ask before we show off the game itself. As someone who's designed games, I have learned that there is a difference between interesting and fun. Where I would implement rules that I thought were interesting and intriguing, and it turned out in practice weren't actually a lot of fun for the players. So where's the fun in Brassbound? What do you think brings players back to it time and time again? Sounds like you've got a very active community, people who are passionate about the game. What is it that's bringing them back to it?
The biggest thing is that it's not a game that I'm going for, it's an experience that I'm going for, right? When I'm hosting a Learn to Play event, which I do roughly every month, a lot of people just come by and love that it's made out of building bricks. And they say, whoa, this is so cool. Where did you get those? Because I intentionally use a mixture of Lego and third-party products to show that you can use whatever you want. People really, really like that when a unit takes damage or a building takes damage, you can just break parts off of it. And you can show that. Anybody can walk up and see, oh man, that army is struggling. Other people who are coming from more established games like how easy it is. They react that we can play an entire game the amount of time it would take me to complete one of my turns. And then we also have people who I've met on sci-fi story writing boards who are really here just for the story. They don't build the models, they don't play the game. But I think what draws most people in is the model. People say something to the extent of like, wow, I didn't know it was possible to build at this scale. And one thing that I'm really, really careful about is to actually dial back the models in the rule book a little bit. I intentionally do not use the coolest and most complicated models that people have made, because I want to plant that little seed that you can do better. I want people to look at the models and think, that would be really cool if it wasn't just red and black or gray on gray. Or it would be really cool if it had a giant sword. And I absolutely love seeing what people come up with. And so that's just been such a treat to see.
Okay, well, we've been talking about these models for close to 20 minutes now, so I think it's time to pull back the curtain and let's show it off. So why don't you hop over to your table and
sure thing.
We can start showing off the game.
What I've got over here is just a board that I came up with in about 10 minutes. The setting that I'm going after is you've got the coalition, who are kind of NATO coded, and the pact, who are kind of, Soviet Union coded. And we're fighting over this little village here, right? So for me, the story is really, really important. That's what I really love. So what I've got here is the coalition forces kind of coming out of the woods, coming out of the trees, and you've got the brave pact forces defending their city. So this is a game where you're trying to do something. You're not trying to just destroy all of the opponent's units. So there's 3 different things you're actually fighting over in this particular scenario. Number 1 here is the bicentennial tree. And this is a tree that is different than the other trees that grow natively in the forest. And this has deep cultural significance to the people of the city. So that is one thing that they will lay down their lives to defend. The second you'll notice is this river. So in Brassbound, there are 3 kinds of terrain. There's the normal terrain you can just go right through with no problems. There's rough terrain, like a wreck or a ruin, and there's impassable terrain, like a stream. You just can't drive through it. And so what we've got is the only bridge that crosses that river for 10 miles in either direction. That's another thing we're going to fight over. The third thing is a natural resource. It's an oil derrick meant to represent an oil refinery. And this is something that both sides want to try to capture so that they can have a leg up on the next battle. So where we're capturing here, the battle's already begun. You notice that one of the tanks has been knocked out. It's on fire and its turret's been popped off. Another tank over here has been hit as well, but it hasn't yet been killed. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate some units and we're going to show you how this game works. You'll note that the rulers are also made of building bricks. And the statistics for how the different units move and operate is all based on those building bricks. So this tank, for example, here, can move a length of 4 building bricks. And it's very simple. You pick it up and you move it. Unlike other games, line of sight is very easy and very unambiguous. You look down, and if the middle of the unit that you're activating can see the middle of the thing you're shooting, you can shoot at it. Similarly, many of the biggest units don't bother with range. If they can see it, they can shoot it. And that kind of goes back to the core principle of making it fast. I didn't want to have these scenarios where your turns take 5 minutes only to find you can't do anything. So in this particular scenario, this tank has one of those 5+ checks I was telling you about. So I'm going to take 2 of these 10-sided dice and roll them, looking for a 5 or better, and I get 1 success. Now, all the units in the game only exist in 3 states. They're either totally fine, they're completely dead, or they're somewhere in between. There's no tracking wounds or any of that kind of stuff. It's all very simple and very straightforward. And what you see is what you get. If it's on fire, it's on fire. If it's not, it's not. So what we're going to do is see if this red Brassbound right here can resist, using its armor, the shot that it just took from this tank. And it is looking for a 3 or less, and it gets a 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of fire on here to show that it is now damaged. And this is where, you cue in the pew 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 sounds, or maybe the groan as it falls over. So now that the gray team has activated, it is time for the red team to activate. And so what I want to show you is a really neat capability of these Brassbounders. So these are meant to be the hero units of the universe. They're the thing that the whole universe is named after. They are single-person war machines made from the very carapaces of their fallen enemies. And their signature thing is that they can jump over terrain. And so this tank over here might think that it's safe, but little does it know, this Brassbounder can actually leap up. They bounce off the top of the building and land on the other side of the river. And all of a sudden, this tank over here that thought it was safe is very much not, because you have this Brassbounder jump over it. So, because these are the hero units, they have dice that are equally good against the 4 under check and the 5 above check. And so in this case, they're looking for 5 or better. I roll 2 dice, I get 1 5. And now we're going to see if the tank can survive. So what I'm going to do is take that same dice that scored the hit, and I'm going to re-roll it. Now, tanks are a little bit tougher than Brassbounders. So they're actually looking for a 4 or lower to save. And it gets 2. So you can see, the pew, pew, pew sound, and it pings off the armor, and the tank shrugs it off, but it's okay. So that is 2 complete activations. The way the game will work is that each player has the option to activate each one of their units. So if the gray team went first this round, they'll activate a unit, then the red team, then the gray team, then the red team. And next round, the red team will get to go first. So there's strategy involved in thinking where you're going to place your units based on where you're going to activate next turn. Now, one thing we didn't talk about was another really cool mechanic, which is how squads work. So a squad is a unit made up of multiple models, such as these guys. I'm going to pull them up a little bit so you can see them. So these are third party. They're not official Lego. But the way that squads take damage is that when they get a hit, you simply remove a guy and put him next to the squad. Now, what's going to happen is that their mates are going to try to save him. So he's not going to die outright, but the next time you activate that squad, they've got a chance to try to save their wounded comrade here. So there's 3 of them, and so they're looking for a 3 or less. And they get a 4. So unfortunately, this guy expires, and we remove him from the game. And so what this allows you to do is at any point in the game, stand up, walk over, and tell how things are going. When I do learn to play events, I usually have 2 or 3 games going simultaneously. And it's very easy for me to walk over and see kind of high level who's winning based on how much fire there is, how many models are missing. And what you'll see is I've got a variety of different models, and that's intentional, right? This Brassbounder looks different than that Brassbounder. This tank looks different than that tank. These are proprietary third-party models. These guys are just brick-built soldiers. That's the whole joy. You can use whatever you want. Whatever your heart wants to see, you can make it.
So for a scenario like this, how much would you roughly say it would cost someone to put that together?
If you're in the United States, it is under $30 to buy a copy of every model in the core rulebook, plus shipping. And it's going to depend really heavily on where you are, but generally speaking, shipping runs $8 to $16. For these specific models, probably a bit less than that. It is going to vary a little bit. So one thing that I try to do is I not only make the list of parts you need for all the models, but I've also started making what are called army packs. And again, that's aimed at making it easier for new players to get started. And this is a curated list of units that work well together, and they're completely free. And it includes the building instructions and the parts lists. And those generally run about $13 in parts. Plus, again, $8 to $16 in shipping, depending on where exactly you're shipping from. What I've heard is that some people don't want to go through the fuss of ordering their own models. And so we do actually also have starter kits available for sale. A starter kit is enough to get you interested in the game. It comes with the core rule set, it comes with 6 models and all the markers and tokens you need. You provide the playing area and the dice, and you are ready to go. So we do have those available for people in the United States as well.
So it sounds like you've really gone to a lot of effort, like as we mentioned before, to really lower the barrier of entry for this game, which again, when you compare it to other games of its type, is not always the case. And it seems like it's been very successful. You've had a number of people who have become very enthusiastic about it. So what is your hope? You and I have talked a little bit, outside about some of the plans and the thoughts you've had about the Brassbound universe. So what are some of the ideas that you've been playing with?
Yeah. I would like to see the community get to the point that it's self-sustaining. So what I mean by that is more narrative-based conversations about the story that are initiated by other people. More, hey, I had this really cool idea. What do you guys think about it? Type conversations. We are starting to see that to an extent. So, for example, one of our community members said, you know what? This would be a really good opportunity for a role-playing game. And so that person is working on a role-playing game set in Brassbound universe where you will play the part of a pilot. And so you'll complete some missions as yourself in the pilot and some missions in your Brassbounder where you're going to go and upgrade it and go do specific things. Another person said, this would make for a really good real-time strategy game. One of the really big influences on the game in terms of the model design was the Command and Conquer Red Alert series. And so we've leaned into that, and we've gone as far as to actually make prototype buildings. We've got a rule set. We've been talking quite a lot about it. And then that's where I'd really like to see things go, let me just take a step back and watch how it all kind of flourishes by itself.
So if someone wants to learn a little bit more about Brassbounder, where can they go?
Yeah. So I try to make things really, really easy. The main website is my itch page. So it's itch.io/Brassbound. Every time I do a learn to play event, I actually have a QR code that I've made out of Lego that people can scan. It'll take you right to my website. That usually gives people a kick. From there, you're going to see the latest version of the rules and that how to order your army document that I mentioned. It will also link you to my storefront, which is a Ko-Fi page. Almost everything on there is free. There's additional content for you to play. There's model kits. There's stuff not even related to Brassbound on there as well. I do accept donations on Ko-Fi, and that is because one thing that's really, really important to me is supporting and promoting other independent creators. All of the artwork and graphics and all of my rule books were either generated digitally with a 3D modeling program or drawn by hand by somebody in our community. And while I'm very fortunate that I can give away all of my creative works for free, not everybody else can. And so I do try to raise a small amount of money so I can say thank you to those artists that contribute directly by making videos, by making drawings, by making other kind of graphical assets that I do not have the skill to make.
Okay. All right. It sounds like you've really developed something special here. And we will include links to your website and your Discord and your Ko-Fi page in the show notes. So, Paul, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me and discuss your game. And if anyone has found this to be interesting or intriguing, like I said, all of the links will be in the show notes. And please do like and subscribe to see more videos for new designers like Paul. And I'd like to thank everybody, and everyone have a great day.